I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Nunberg. Not a name everyone knows, but Nunberg. A name everyone will know. Today, said he was going to defy the grand jury subpoena, ripped up the paperwork. I'm not doing it. Yeah, good luck on that one. And came out and said that he believes Mueller's got something on Trump. He believes Trump knew Jr. Had the meeting with the Russian lawyer. Basically came out and let it all go. Nunberg. And the other part of this is you go, Nunberg, if you're going to throw yourself into the middle of this and say, I'm ripping up the subpoena, which is going to tick off Mueller, you don't throw the Marmalade Mussolini under the bus as well. This is just, basic, sandbox. You don't bite both hands that feed you. Or in this case, both hands that are going to beat the living tar out of you. But hey, at least now we know that Trump colluded with the Russians. This is the breaking news today. The Nunberg hath spoken. Going to be interesting to see what happens to Mr. Nunberg, because he's a young guy. There's a lot of time to be spent in prison for ripping up a subpoena from a grand jury. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but there's mine. Things are getting crazier and crazier by the day. Today, the big story, obviously, coming out of East Lansing, Michigan, where you had a bunch of fights breaking out between Nazis and anti-fascist protesters. And I keep coming back to, look, I'm a free speech advocate, but what in the hell is Richard Spencer doing on any college campus in this country? What is this hate monger doing anywhere, and why would you bring him to a college campus? Yes, I believe unpopular speech should be something that you have, but why put yourself in the middle of all this? This guy offers nothing. There's nothing there other than, filling his coffers, other than making a name for him and Milo. Did you see this other thing where, and you gotta love this, Milo said there was a credible threat. And I can't even say Milo's last name, Yiannopoulos, some weird, very long name that I butcher anyway. But here is a way out, right-wing, just off to the fringe kind of white supremacist hate monger who is flamingly, boisterously gay. And you go, exactly, it's just weird, bizarre kind of stuff. And he said there was a credible threat against his life. which is why they had to cancel things, why they had to move him and all this stuff. And yet the police who he claims told him there was a credible threat had never had any type of threat whatsoever. And it's one of these things where, there's part of me that goes, they're making this stuff up as they go because they need the attention. They're attention mongers. They don't believe any of this stuff. And look, I've gone to talk radio conventions over the years, and I've met some of the most way out. I've met Alex Jones a couple of times, and the guy, on microphone is nutty as a loon, but in person seemed like a reasonable guy. Had a nice conversation, talked about sports, talked about all kinds of things. But man, as soon as you turn on that microphone and you turn on the cash switch, it's all crazy all the time. And that's this stuff. Now, do I think Richard Spencer's not a white supremacist? No, I don't believe he's not a white supremacist. I believe he's a hate monger. He's all of those things. But I keep coming back to, why do they keep inviting these people to college campuses? They have nothing to offer. There's nothing there academically to offer whatsoever. And look, we're, again, at these polar opposite poles, where this weekend you had Dana Loesch, who is a nationally syndicated radio host, and also the spokeswoman for the NRA. She's basically the pretty face who goes in, no, we really love our guns, and we're not going to kill the children yet. She tweeted out, which got everyone's attention, a video of herself coming out and saying, look, to every lying member of the media, to every Hollywood phony, to the role model athletes who use their free speech to alter and undermine what our flag represents, your time is running out. And she tips over a little thing, a little hourglass. The clock starts now. And I'm like, is this a threat? Are you making a veiled threat? What, now you're going to start shooting again? And this is the bizarre world of which our weekend just became. But understand, our president, not fazed. Broke a record this weekend. Out of 408 days in office, this president has gone golfing 100 days. So 100 out of 408 days, the Marmalade Mussolini found himself chasing a little white ball around a big green area. And you go, really? Did anyone remember back on August 8th of 2016 when he said, I'm going to be working for you. I'm not going to have time to play golf. Does anyone remember that? Does anyone remember how he said he was just going to be busy, and he'd be working, and no time for golf? 25% of his time playing golf. Now, I guess that is down from, before he was president. But understand, these are the same people who every time Obama did anything, they railed on him to no end. Look, I would love to see Donald Trump playing golf 100% of the time. I would love him golfing 408 days in a row. This way, there's no time to cause any of the other trouble. But isn't it ironic that all of the stuff that we see that had Obama done, it would have been the end of civilization as we know it. But here's the thing. Even with the backdrop of all the crazy that's going on, all of the right-wing nonsense, all of the white supremacist hate, and all of the Nectarine Nero's nonsense, there's tons of organizing going on in this country, from Florida to West Virginia to Oklahoma and everywhere, far and wide in between, with all of it. And we're hearing this, we're not going to take it anymore, sentiment ringing loud and clear. Today in West Virginia, 20,000 teachers out of the classroom since February 22nd, the 8th consecutive strike day where the entire state, some 277,000 students not in class. All because you've got a West Virginia Senate who evidently passed a bill over the weekend that, oops, we didn't actually mean to pass what we passed, so we got to hurry up and go back so we can take a percent away. We're keeping 277,000 kids out of the classroom for about $6 million. That's the difference between the House bill in West Virginia and what the Senate is trying to impose. The governor has said he wants it. The House wants it. You've got Joe Manchin who said, hey, get this done. This is a no-brainer. Except what it is the Republicans don't want to lose. They don't want to lose face to organizing. And I keep coming back to this conversation I had earlier today with someone who said, why can't we just get this done? Everyone agrees. Even the people in the Senate agree that this has to happen. Why can't it just get done? Why does it always have to be this kind of tension when everybody agrees? And it's purely, simply comes down to the Republicans have to impose their will. This is about winning and losing. This isn't about good governance. This isn't about our kids' education. This isn't about the future of the country. It's not about the flag or democracy or mom or apple pie. It's about none of that. It's about pure unadulterated power and me saying, you're going to get what we say and you're not going to get a cent more. And good on these teachers for saying, you know what? We're not going to take it. And what this has brought about is, as we speak, in Oklahoma, right to work state, Oklahoma, the teachers there are looking at doing the exact same thing. In fact, they've said on April 2nd, they're going on strike. And I spoke with one of the guys who's leading this up, and he's saying, is there any chance that we miss this date, that it gets resolved? And he's like, there's absolutely no chance that they're going to fix this. Things are so badly broken that it's time to take to the streets. It's time for people to take their democracy back. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to have him come and talk about what's going on in Oklahoma. But also, you look at West Virginia. Right now, you've got striking CWA workers against Frontier Communications who are saying, you know what? 10 months of negotiating, 10 months of begging to get more people on the job to help us serve our customers better. Nothing. Going to the picket lines. And I'm telling you, I predicted this months ago, that eventually post-Janus, and I think everyone realizes that the Janus decision is going to go the wrong way, but in the post-Janus world, at a time when industrial peace is gone, the era of the NLRA's industrial peace is done. It's going to be more people taking to the streets, more people standing up, and more people sitting down, and more people, marching in the streets, whatever it takes. Because for 40 years, you've seen stagnant wages. For 40 years, you've seen working conditions get worse. For 40 years, you've seen benefits getting worse. You've seen all of those things that the labor movement built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s eviscerated by the Reagan-era Republicans who preach trickle down and give the rich people all the money, and we need more corporate influence. And I tell you, it's exciting times. It's exciting times to see people open their eyes, get off their duffs, and actually start moving. It's exciting times. West Virginia could be the place that leads us back out of the dark age. To me, that's exciting stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Also, this idea of corporate rule. We're going to bounce that around a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Ed Mooney, Vice President of CWA District 2-13, going to be here. He's the head of the CWA union who is on strike there in West Virginia. Going to get some of his thoughts on what's going on there and why it's going on. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
90% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day auto workers at GM's Chevy Vega plant in Lordstown, Ohio, walked out on strike. The strike lasted for 18 days. The issues that fueled it were reminiscent of the sit-downs and wildcats that built the UAW in the 30s and 40s. Workers at Lordstown wanted greater control over the production process. The young, integrated workforce of the 1960s social protest era was fed fed up with long days, forced overtime, increased automation, and dangerous speed up on the assembly line. Long-standing grievances numbered in the thousands, and disciplinary firings were common. Absenteeism was rampant, morale was so low that cars left the assembly line incomplete or vandalized. By the time the strike ended, many felt it was called simply to allow workers to blow off steam. There was no real change in the production process, but jobs eliminated in the 1970 contract were restored, and some 1,400 disciplinary layoffs were dropped. The worker malaise suffered there came to be known as the Lordstown Syndrome. In his book, Staying Alive, the 1970s and the Last Days of the Working Class, Jefferson Cowie notes that the strike compelled the Senate to hold hearings on alienation at work. Its committee produced the report Work in America. This report confirmed many workers at all occupational levels feel locked in. Their mobility blocked, the opportunity to grow lacking in their jobs, challenge missing from their tasks. Cowie concludes that the strike and report initiated the quality of work-life movement that sought to redesign work, introduce automation differently, and invest in human relation strategies, most of which continued to empower management, not workers, albeit with a gentler hand.
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So are we seeing the West Virginia effect as teachers were once again carrying picket signs and walking the lines as schools in all 55 counties were closed for the 8th consecutive day? And over the weekend, you had CWA members at Frontier Communications who also took to the picket line after 10 months of negotiations and a number of contract extensions. And it got me tweeting out this morning that, is what we're seeing in West Virginia, will West Virginia be the spark that wakes workers to the reality that we've been getting screwed for the last 40 years, and together we have real power? And I tweeted out, I said, AFT 55 United Teachers and CWA members striking at Frontier have had enough. And oddly enough, Frontier, the Ask Frontier people thanked me for sharing the fact that the CWA members were on strike. And I got it, just kind of a disconnect. But the reality is you've got workers all across this country ready. But here to talk about this Frontier situation, I've asked Ed Mooney to come talk with us. Ed is the Vice President of CWA District 2-13. Ed, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome, Rick. Thanks for having me, buddy.
So I'm looking at West Virginia as, wow, could this be the resurgence of workers taking to the pickets?
Man, from your lips to God's ears. So I hope so. And you know what? This is about, you see what the teachers are doing, which is absolutely amazing, the unity that they're showing across the state of West Virginia, not only for themselves, but for the West Virginia Troopers Association and also for the rest of the state workers in West Virginia. There's also a bill in there that will help to improve the compensation for the corrections officers in the state of West Virginia, right? This is where they're watching all these giveaways to corporations, and the answer is still to the working man and woman, you're not getting anything, right? You're still getting screwed. So, we hope that this will be the spark. It's certainly not what, what we thought we would fall into this pattern at this time, but due to the expiration date and Frontier's refusal to invest in a secure workforce and investing in their network, this is where we find ourselves.
Now, as I understand it, you can help me along here. This strike is really about the number of workers who have been fired or laid off or done away with over the years. That seems to be, from what I'm reading, one of the main sticking points.
Right. Well, they're shedding workers since they acquired West Virginia. They now don't have enough employees to perform the work as it is. The complaints at the Service Commission have skyrocketed. Their investment in the network has deteriorated to near zero. And the customers are furious. And when they acquired the state of West Virginia in 2010 from Verizon, they made commitments that they would invest in the network and build out the next generation network in this state, and they simply have failed to do it.
Yeah.
So, between that, and obviously if the network's no good and you're losing customers, then they're going to have to shed jobs. But now we're at the point, we worked with them to voluntarily get people to leave the payroll. Then they were threatening to lay people off just prior to the expiration. The threat of layoff went away, but they don't want to provide the employment security to those employees without the protection now. So you know what would happen there. If we settle a contract and we ratify it, then they just start the layoff process over again. And now we have a 21, and the layoff process takes place in 90 days, and we have no way to fight it. So the timing of this worked out perfectly in our opinion. We're out here with the teachers, demonstrating solidarity with them, fighting for our own issues. The West Virginia Troopers Association is involved in the pay bill that the Senate has screwed up as well as the rest of the state workers in the state who have been getting nothing for years. Look at all the natural resources that come out of this state, whether it's coal, natural gas, or anything else they take out of the ground, with zero returned to the residents in the state of West Virginia for them to utilize for anything going forward.
Yeah, I've often
and
argued
that's
that West
exactly
Virginia.
what they're doing with the telecom network.
Right.
So.
I've often argued West Virginia should be the richest state in the country for the people who live there, because of all the resources taken out. Like you said, coal, natural gas, timber. Get on the list.
Right. Well, and we all know what happened with that is because they have the system set up in such a way that they give away any break. The best thing I heard about natural resources is if they come here for the natural resource and you don't let them take it out of the ground, it doesn't go anywhere. It's still there. And the natural resources actually belong to the residents of the state. They don't belong to these people who want to come in and extract it out. Right? So, there's states like North Dakota has a fund set up where they require X percent is contributed out of anything that comes out of the ground, whether it's oil, gas, natural coal, whatever. X percent goes into a state fund to be used for the state, whether it's education, roads, or other things. And I don't know where they went sideways with that here, but it's certainly good to see a movement like this developing and people engaging in these fights. And obviously, to any of the customers from Frontier in West Virginia, and also there's a building in Ashburn, Virginia that's involved in this strike, but the customers are in the state of West Virginia. For any of them that we're adversely impacting by not being on the job, we apologize. But, we're fighting for those customers as well because we're trying to fight to hold the company accountable to invest in the network. So that's where we find ourselves.
Right. And as I read, the number of complaints in just a 3-year period from 2014 to 2017 rose by 69%. And you go, as customers, that's not a good thing. And you want good service. You want people who are going to be well-trained, experienced, qualified to come out and fix your problems, not somebody who's going to go, oh, these are wires. I don't know what to do with them, but I know they're wires.
Right. Well, it's the same. It's the same issue, right? We've had it in other states, and now we just filed a complaint at the commission, identifying for the commission all the issues that we found around the state. Because while the company's telling us there's no work for people and they have to put people off the payroll, we're finding the dollars they're spending on subcontractors skyrocketing. The quality of the network in the state is deteriorating, and the numbers of employees in the state that are under good-paying union contracts have diminished around 400 since they acquired the place in 2010. And, we're on the picket lines because we said enough is enough.
Right. And they've got a CEO who, last I checked, $5.5 million in compensation. They got enough for that, right?
Right. Well, and even that, as far as CEOs go, he's paid modestly, right? So, and I never like to get into the compensation of the executives. That is what it is. Here's another statistic for you. We had asked them what is the benefit they got of the Corporate Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was just passed. Apparently, they missed the last part, Jobs Act. But the corporate tax cut, I said, tell us what you have realized as a benefit as a result of that tax cut. And in writing, they gave us back a response and said we didn't realize any money because Frontier doesn't pay any federal taxes.
Say that again.
They pay zero federal taxes.
How do they get away with that?
Because they claim their debt that they've accumulated allows them to write off their entire tax obligation. How great would that be at home? How many relationships would still be intact in this country if when somebody comes somebody in the relationship comes home and says, oops, I'm sorry, I ran up this monumental debt. Instead of saying I'm fed up and that's it, we're done, you say, don't worry, we'll write it off on our taxes. It'll lessen our federal tax obligation to the federal government. It's okay. That's what corporations get away with doing, where the individual ends up in bankruptcy or some kind of other tragedy that happens to them, right? So they have realized, by the way, an $836 million write-down on a $2 billion debt obligation that they would have had that now allow them to refinance the debt they do have to restructure it. So in our eyes, the benefit they got from it was $836 million, which even though the tax didn't go into effect for the rest of us until 2018, they were able to realize that based on their 2017 financials, their fourth quarter financials. So once again, when they're saying they're passing that, it was a middle-class tax cut. So I don't know how many middle-class people got an $836 million benefit out of that. If you did, then I'd like you to figure out how to get into your middle class.
Yeah, I'm with you. But last I saw, it was $1.50 a week, enough for a Costco membership.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was great. Well, I'm happy they're going to Costco and not Walmart. So if you got to go somewhere, Costco's a better employer and a much better to their employees.
So in looking at this, I mean, there's got to be pressure that could be put on folks. What's the marching order? I mean, at the end of the day, you're out on strike. This is hopefully not going to be. Nobody wants to do this. This is the last arrow in the quiver. What's the hope?
So we hope that they come to their senses, and we're in full strike mode, and we have our members doing what we have to do. The company's trying to hire scabs, as every corporate crumb tries to do, to bring other working people into this dispute. As I've said on your show before, living Jay Gould's dream, which is to hire one half of the working class to kill the other half. And we're finding them as they come in here. They're putting them up at hotels, trying to house them, and we'll communicate with the hotels to have them thrown out, or to identify the hotel as a scab hotel going forward. And, they'll spend all the money they can not to give it to their own employees to try to, frustrate the union's demands, which we won't have. So we have tremendous labor support throughout the state of West Virginia. As you know, I am responsible for 5 states in the District of Columbia, not just West Virginia. Locals from those other states are sending members here to support us as well. Many of them with 7 recent weeks of experience of being on strike against Verizon. So, working people are standing up, standing shoulder to shoulder with each other and fighting back. And we have a state senator here in West Virginia, Senator Ojeda, who is an absolute rock star when it comes to workers' issues. He stands up toe-to-toe with the energy companies, with anyone else. We're getting a lot of political support, obviously, from Senator Manchin. Even the governor, who changed parties on us after he was elected, is communicating with the company to tell them that they need to get to the table and resolve this issue. And, it comes down to a very simple thing. They need to secure the employment, the future employment of the employees they have for the term of this contract, and they need to do the work of West Virginia in West Virginia with union members who they have an obligation to. With that, they couple that with investing in the network, give us the tools and the ability to build out this network, and we'll beat every competitor in the state side by side with them. But when you don't have the tools to do the job, they won't invest in the technology or the infrastructure, or they cut you back so much that you're not doing any of that building. All you're doing is riding around putting Band-Aids on things, then this is what we get.
Yeah. You said a minute ago that they're trying to bring in scabs and they're putting them up in hotels and doing all that stuff. It's always amazing to me that you get these companies who will spend untold amounts of money to bring in those people and house them and all of that. In fact, most of the time it's more money than they would have spent just, giving the union what they needed to go forward. And it just seems like it's a giant, it's one of these tests of wills. And I look at the point where we are in our country with Trump in the White House and all of this, corporate power. And it just seems to be that it's not even about the money. It's just purely about the power.
Well, and if it's a test of wills, I'm sure you're aware. We had a will in 2011 in the CWA and the IBW against Verizon. We had a will in the CWA and the IBW with Verizon in 2015 for 49 days. We had a will at AT&T Mobility, and now we have a will at Frontier Communications. And, the CWA, the IBW, every other labor union in the state of West Virginia and anywhere else we can bring members into this state, we will stand up and fight for what's right and fight for middle-class union membership and workers in this state and this country. So that's not going to end.
Yeah.
Especially here in the state of West Virginia, where there's a tremendous amount of labor history. I was down in Logan, West Virginia yesterday with Senator Ojeda, driving through the southern coal fields of West Virginia, where we have tons and tons of labor history. And believe me when I tell you, there may not be as many coal miners down there, but the attitudes and the commitment and the will to fight back hasn't diminished one bit. These people are ready, willing to fight, and the residents and the businesses in this state are going to stand by them and fight with them because they know they have seen this trick before. They have seen companies come in here and extract from the residents and the businesses of this state things that they shouldn't have extracted when they committed to reinvest in it. So we're going to hold them accountable to reinvest in it, to employ West Virginians, to do work for West Virginians, and maintain good middle-class jobs in this state under this collective bargaining agreement.
Good stuff, Ed. I appreciate the time. If there's anything we can do as this goes forward, we'd love to have you come back and keep us up to date and know you've got a friend here, and we stand in solidarity with you and your members.
Right. And I appreciate it all the time. And, anytime if you don't hear from me in some time period as you have now, please reach out to me, and that will remind me to get back on here. While I'm busy with this other stuff, I always take time to get on here, update your listeners, and appreciate the opportunity you give us to get our message out.
Thanks so much, Ed. Good stuff. Again, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can keep up to date with the CWA 2-13's strike and get information there along the way. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our back, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money. We work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations. It's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's voice
Your
is
working class
stronger.
radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1770. That was the day of the Boston Massacre, when the first shots of the American Revolution were fired. But did you know that the massacre happened in part because of a dispute over jobs? In 1767, the British had passed the Townshend Revenue Act. It levied import taxes on goods such as tea, lead, paint, paper, and glass. Colonists were required to purchase these items from the British. The aim was to raise money to pay for the salaries of government officials in the colonies. The colonists resented the taxes and organized boycotts against the goods. Boston was at the heart of the dissent. In response, the British moved their soldiers into port cities to see the enforcement of the law. This angered the colonists even further. British soldiers tried to find part-time work since they earned poor wages for their service. This put the soldiers in direct competition with the tradesmen in Boston. Things came to a head when a brawl broke out between a group of colonist rope makers and British soldiers. 3 days later, about 50 colonists taunted the sentry at the custom house and pelted him with snowballs. More soldiers rushed to the scene. A soldier shot into the crowd. It's believed by accident. A volley of shots then rang out. 5 protesters fell dead. One was a rope maker by the name of Samuel Gray. Another was an African-American man named Crispus Attucks. The British attempted to appease the colonists by repealing all of the import taxes except the one on tea. But this reversal came too late. The shots had been fired that began the march to revolution. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left.
Working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, red shed a bomb red. Father, son, left to carry on, blue denim, had his vein. He's a working class man.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So last week we were talking about how Dick's Sporting Goods and Walmart and oddly enough, Kroger were doing something on the gun issue. And as we were talking about last week, it's sad that our government keeps dragging their feet. And in fact, you had Donald Trump, who I don't know where he's at this moment. I don't even think he knows where he's at with all the flipping and flopping. Who knows? But it's interesting that things have gone so far down the road that it's corporations making the decisions that our government should be making. And that sentiment was bore out in the latest piece by Will Bunch over at the Philadelphia Daily News. That's why I've asked Will to come talk with us. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks a lot, Rick. Thanks for having me back.
So, I look at this, last week you saw, Dick's Sporting Goods, Walmart, Kroger, saying, nope, we're going to do something. Raise the age or not sell AR-15s. And I'm going, that's all fine, well, and good. But, isn't this what we should be doing for ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, that was my take. And it was interesting because I think the initial reaction that I saw on social media was, just, fairly joyous, thank you so much, Dick's, and, thank you, Walmart, to the extent they did, and Kroger, who even knew they sold guns in the supermarkets, but apparently, I guess in Alaska, they need it for bears or whatever. But anyway, so the initial reaction from, a lot of the progressive people I follow was, this is great that these corporations are stepping up and doing the right thing. And my reaction was sort of, but, wait a minute here, they're only doing this because our government is so broken and so in such a state of disrepair that they're just incapable of tackling this issue, even when polls show overwhelming majorities of the public want to get this done. So we have a situation where anywhere from 85 to, according to one poll, 97% of people want stronger background checks in this country. 66% just now generally say they support gun control, which is the highest level ever. And if government worked the way it was supposed to, government would respond. And instead, you saw these scenes, you saw Marco Rubio on national TV down in Florida, blithering that, yes, of course I'm going to be, in front of his constituents on live TV, of course I'm going to do something about guns. And then he gets back to Washington and he remembers who he works for, which is the NRA, and he takes back most of it. And, like you said, Donald Trump, who knows where he is, his new thing these last few months is to have these meetings that he officiates at, where it's kind of like an outtake from The Apprentice, right? It's like it's a kind of a reality show thing where he says whatever pops into his head, and of course he takes these popular, often kind of more liberal positions in public, and then when he gets away from the TV cameras, his advisors pull him aside, and it's like, no, you're a Republican, you can't do this. And so the result is nothing. So corporations are setting the show. It's corporations that are setting the policy on climate change. It's corporations that are setting the policies on infrastructure. People can't get to work in San Francisco. Don't improve the mass transit. We'll have the Google bus. We'll have that.
The best democracy money can buy. I mean, right now you've got corporations fully in control, and we've been talking about this for years, though, Will. And this, is this surprising to you? I mean, the reality is you were right. I watched Donald Trump's little spiel or his apprentice program on the gun issue where he's saying, we need to, bump stocks, they're out of here, and 21 and assault weapons, and he was, the liberals were going, this is what we want, and then he had dinner with the guy from the head lobbyist from the NRA, and you go, wait a second.
I know he's having dinner with the NRA, and of course he takes everything back. I think what's interesting right now and what's different is this: people like you, people like me, we've been talking since the Reagan era about corporate power and how it keeps gaining, and how corporations control our politicians, and then Citizens United came along and they can spend unlimited amounts of money, and we've known about all these things for a number of years. What's kind of interesting, though, is, and it's a twist on the story, I guess, is, these consumer-facing companies like Dick's, like Walmart, like Amazon or Google or Facebook, or, that they realize that they depend on the goodwill of the public. And the public, especially the younger public, which is very important to corporate America, is getting more progressive on a lot of issues.
And getting more active and more organized. I mean, when you look at what's happened after this Parkland shooting, and I've been wondering when this moment was going to happen, when this spark would hit, where people just take to the streets and say, we're shutting things down. But
the response on guns has all been from corporations on two fronts. One, like we've been talking about, the Dick's and the Walmarts and their new restrictions on people under 21 buying guns or on assault weapons. And the other thing that's happened related to that is these companies that have business relationships with the NRA, the airlines, the rental car companies, the prescription eyeglasses, all these people who are offering discounts to the NRA were basically told by the consumers, you cut your ties to the NRA or we're going to boycott you and you're going to lose a substantial amount of business. And basically every one of them pretty much, except maybe for FedEx, but most of them responded to that. And so it's what's happening is it's like the people have realized, marching on Washington and telling our politicians what to do is almost seems useless in this day and age. But when we use our power as consumers, when we tell people we're going to boycott or we're going to stop buying their goods if they don't adopt more socially progressive policies, the corporations are actually forced to listen. Yeah. And it's good. It's a weird thing. It's good and it's bad. I mean, given the current state of play, I mean, if the only power you have is as a consumer, then use it. That's great, but that's not the way it should be. Because no matter how progressive these corporations are on certain issues, first of all, a couple things about that. One, they're never going to be progressive on economic issues. When it comes to labor unions, when it comes to minimum wage, when it comes to tax breaks, they're not going to be on the side of the public. They're going to be on the side of themselves. I mean, the reason they want to do the right thing on something like guns or something like LGBT rights and some of the other things where you see these more progressive things, they're not doing it because it's the right thing. They're doing it because they want goodwill from customers to spend money on their product.
And they don't want people out protesting. And look, isn't this, haven't we seen this movie before, though, Will? I mean, you go back to the 1920s and the 30s of the labor movement, where they were doing a lot of this kind of boycotting. So, I mean, we're not, we're just rediscovering this in this generation, I think.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. And, it'll be interesting to see, where the rubber is really hitting the road right now. And I know you've been talking about this a lot on your show is West Virginia. If you want to talk about throwbacks and people going back to the old ways of trying to get things done.
Yeah, and not just West Virginia, soon to be Oklahoma.
Yeah, exactly. That other states are looking at this and saying, and it's interesting. I mean, these tend to be the reddest states where you've got legislatures that are totally bought off by big oil, big gas, or big coal, I guess, in the case of West Virginia, that only exist to enact policies that reduce regulations on industries. And when it comes to education, it's, cut to the bone, take away resources, hold down teacher pay, And in West Virginia, I guess, is an unusual situation. I mean, I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks, but I guess the way they handle issues like teacher pay is more on a statewide level, because where I'm at in Pennsylvania, it's done very much locally. But in West Virginia, the state legislature has an enormous amount of clout, which is good in a way because it gives these striking teachers a pressure point, I think, to really, instead of having to deal with 197 different school districts or whatever, they're dealing with one legislature. So so that's interesting. But
Yeah, it's a different way, but at the end of the day, it still comes down to what I think's happening, and what I hope is happening is that people are starting to realize that collective action, that coming together, organizing, that has real power, be it at the cash box or be it in the streets. This stuff you have real power, and also at the ballot box. But I'm hoping we're discovering that.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm being overly optimistic, and maybe I'm being naive, but I think things are going to be a little different after the 2018 election. The reason I say that is because not just because I think it's going to be a good year for Democratic candidates, although I do think it is going to be a very good year for Democratic candidates because dissatisfaction with Donald Trump is so high. But it's not just that Democrats are going to do well, but it's who those Democrats are going to be. And what I mean by that is ever since the night Trump was elected in November 2016, there's just been this grassroots energy and anger out there. You saw it in the Women's March. You've seen it in the resistance. You've seen it in the people who went to town halls to speak up about repealing Obamacare. And now, and that was in 2017. Now that 2018 is here, you're seeing it in record numbers of people signing up to run for office, and not just Congress, although there is that, but also record numbers of people signing up to run for state legislature, county council, city council, school boards, to try and take back every level of government. And an inordinate number of these people are women, which is fantastic. And many of them are much more progressive than what we've seen from the Democratic Party in the past. So you look at these grassroots candidates, and the vast majority of them that I've covered, I mean, the real grassroots candidates, not the ones being put out there by the DCCC, the Blue or whatever their program is. I'm talking about first-time grassroots candidates. They're supporting some form of single-payer health care, Medicare for all, or some variation of that. They're supporting some sort of universal college, free tuition program. So we're talking about a true liberal agenda. So I think this election has a chance to bring an actual change more than any election we've seen, certainly in the last few decades anyway.
I hope you're right. No, I hope you're right, Will.
The 70s.
Here's one of the things that you didn't say, and this is one of the things that's concerning to me as a labor person. You didn't throw labor into that, and sadly, a lot of these new candidates don't have the exposure to labor. They're right on a lot of the issues, and I fear that falls to the wayside, is where I believe that's central to getting all of those other things. Economic justice is right there at the top of the list.
No, you're right, and that's a good point. I mean, a lot of energy on the left is coming from suburbs. There seems to be, some of these suburban districts seem to be like where I live in Delaware County, outside of Philadelphia. There's a lot of anger about Trump. There's a lot of excitement. But you're right. These candidates, a lot of them tend to come from backgrounds that are not necessarily strong union backgrounds. But I will say this though. I hear where you're coming from on that. I don't sense there's hostility towards labor though. It may be a lack of awareness in some reason, but given where these candidates are coming from, I think as they get deeper into it, I mean there's a certain responsibility on labor to reach out and connect with these new candidates, and I'm sure they're probably doing that. I think these candidates want to do the right thing for the middle class, and they may not grasp, the ways exactly that labor is a part of that right now. But I think if they work with labor, I think they'll come around to the right position. So yeah. I'm not totally pessimistic, but I do agree with you that there needs to be more education, more coordination, more of a sense. But I'd be surprised if these candidates are hostile to labor. I just think it's a lack of awareness. I hope so.
No, I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you.
Yeah.
And as I've been saying all along, I'm guardedly optimistic. I have some friends who are like, "There's going to be a blue tsunami, and we're going to take everything back." And I'm going, "Well, I'm not there yet, but I'm guardedly optimistic that we take one of the houses and slow down some of the insanity." So let me ask you a last line of questioning, because I think we both agree that corporate power has grown too large and influence is too much. Is there a way back at this point? And if so, how do we get there?
Well, like as you said, I mean, I think boycotts and other consumer-oriented solutions are kind of a short-term fix. In the meantime, I think the only real fix is to elect a new Congress and state legislators or legislators who will do things like support a $15 or higher wage, for example. Support the measures that are out there that will strengthen unions again. I think that's the two-step, and I think those are the two best ways. I mean, whatever direct influence, whether it's social media or whatever, use that. But I think ultimately you need laws. I mean, that's the only way that you can respond. I mean, getting back to the original, Dick's and Walmart's restricting gun sales or not selling assault weapons is great, but other stores still can legally sell them, and other stores will sell them. So you're not going to ban guns just by getting Dick's to go along with it. You're going to have to have a law. The same is true for economic inequality. You're going to have laws to make that happen. You're not going to be able just to do it through other means, but other means should be deployed when appropriate.
I'm with you. It all comes back down to the rule of law and the halls of power and putting working class folks into those halls. Will, I appreciate the time. Great article. I hope people will take a look at it. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. And as always, thanks so much for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me. Anytime. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Always good stuff. Our good friend Will Bunch. Again, check out his stuff over at the Philly Daily News. Fantastic work. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1879. A steamship named the Colorado docked in St. Louis, Missouri. On board were black migrant workers on their way to Kansas in search of jobs and a better life. They were the first arrivals in what became a wave of black migration out of the U.S. South known as the Exodusters. Nearly 20,000 black workers and their families left Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and other southern states to make their way to Kansas. They were fleeing the oppression of the Ku Klux Klan and the racial violence of the South. A depression in the 1870s had made matters even worse. White planters sought to offset their losses due to the Depression by charging black sharecroppers higher interest rates to farm their land. Some black workers began discussing leaving the South. Benjamin Pap Singleton, a former slave and abolitionist, became a leader of the Exoduster movement. He called for black workers to make a great exodus from the repressive South. Handbills declaring "Ho for Kansas" circulated among Southern black sharecroppers. It was a long, tough journey up the Mississippi River and then west. A reporter from the St. Louis Globe-Democrat visited the families of the first group to arrive in St. Louis. He found 280 men, women, and children, whom he described being in utter want. Local St. Louis black residents organized food and relief for the hungry travelers before they finished the final leg of their journey. In all, black migrant workers purchased 20,000 acres of farmland in Kansas during the 1870s. Later, the search for jobs and freedom from violence and oppression would bring workers to cities like Chicago and Detroit as part of the Great Migration. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. So I spent the weekend just amazed at how the Republicans have turned on Trump, and how they're trying to get the Chamber of Commerce and all of his economic advisors and all of the Wall Street cheerleaders on the same page to get Trump to turn away from the tariffs on steel and aluminum. And it's one of those things that I love this argument that you're going to start a trade war. In fact, the guy who's the Director General of the World Trade Organization, the WTO, Roberto Azevedo, he said that we're on the risk. We're running the risk of a trade war. And he goes on to say, in light of recent announcements on trade policy measures, it's clear it's much, much higher, and it's a real risk of triggering an escalation. If trade barriers across the globe, the sky is falling. And this is a page right out of the NRA playbook. That anything that you do, anything at all, is the end of the world. Most sane, rational people look at our gun laws and go, wow, you can get bump stocks on an AR-15 and make it almost an automatic weapon? That's dumb. And just the mere thought, well, we're going to get rid of those bump stocks. NRA loses their mind because it's an infringement. We lost the automatic weapon fight, years and years ago. We're not losing this one. And no sane, rational thought can possibly be discussed. Nothing. And it's the same thing when you're talking about trade. I had someone, tell me of all the things that that we're now going to have to pay more for. And my favorite was, Levi jeans. They're going to put, they're going to pay imports on Levi's. And I'm going, yeah, I would love to see them made here. I don't want them shipped back into the country. So let me get this straight. An American company who made Levi's made them in a foreign country, and you think it's a bad idea to have a tariff put on them down the road to bring them back into the country where they were originally made. Well, yeah. I'm going, that's a dumb idea. I don't care. I want it made here. You know how hard it is to find an American-made pair of jeans? I mean, honestly and truthfully. And then, my beer is going to cost a penny a six-pack more. And, Campbell's soup's going to cost a penny, a can more. And you go, but we begin reclaiming the manufacturing prowess of this country. We begin to bring those good-paying jobs back. And at the minimum, stop losing the ones that we have. For me, this is about, and good on Trump. I mean, and I know it pains me to say this. It does. It pains me to say that he's actually done something I agree with. But this is something I've been talking about for years. The idea that we're forced to compete with countries that heavily subsidize their industries, have almost no labor protections or environmental protections, and we're forced to compete with desperation. We're forced to compete with near starvation labor who live in camps and have suicide nets in the hallways. Really? I mean, at some point, you've got to say the trade war has been going on for the last 30 years. We just haven't known it. This war has been raging to where all of these other countries have taken on the productive role that we used to play in the world. And now it's just dump time here in the U.S. And look, China is the largest producer of steel in the world. There's no question about that. In fact, their margin of error is how much steel we make. They don't even really know how much steel they output. The margin of error of how much they actually put out and how much they think they put out is about what we put out. So you're talking about a tariff on a very small amount. But you're just saying, hey, this is the line. This small amount we need to keep. And we need to keep it for national security purposes. And, oh, by the way, for rebuilding our country. Understand, China produces, something like 50% of all of the steel produced in the world? And guess where a lot of that comes? right here in the U.S. of A. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. As always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much. Right back.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Sacred heart. I said no ball or chain, no prison shall keep where the rebels out of sacred heart.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So last week had I hit on something that got a bunch of people commenting and sending me emails. It was, you remember when the 3 UCLA basketball players got caught stealing the sunglasses and I guess some bracelets and stuff from Louis Vuitton and a couple other stores in China. And the Chinese police had arrested them, and there was a whole international incident. And Donald Trump threw his I got them out and I did everything myself. Turns out, as I said last week, it was all taken care of long before Donald Trump got involved in it. In fact, the Federation of University Sports China and Alibaba, the company that put it on, along with Pac-12 and UCLA officials, they had all worked it out on Saturday. And John Kelly knew about it Sunday, and Donald Trump went tweet crazy, from then on, accusing, LeVar Ball of, not being appreciative and the kids not being appreciative and whole 9 yards. Turns out, like I said, he had nothing to do with it. So the question then becomes, how is it and what is it about this guy that he takes credit for things he had literally nothing to do with? And here to share some of those thoughts, I've asked our good friend Propane Jane. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So have you seen this story?
Yes, I have.
Am I the only one who looks at this and goes, this should be Exhibit A on why he is not sitting in the Oval Office?
I mean, you're not the only one, I'll tell you that. And I think, if you sort of go back, I mean, this was sort of a difficult back and forth to tease out because LeVar Ball is also in some ways, I think,
a lunatic.
Exactly. Exactly. So, by all outward appearances, it just sort of appeared to be two megalomaniacs going at it with each other. But there actually, these new reports that are coming out from ESPN. I mean, it gives a lot of credence to what LeVar Ball was saying, because what he said at the time was, "I would thank you if I had a reason to thank you, if you actually did anything to be thanked for." And clearly, he had firsthand knowledge of what was actually going on the ground, and so he may have been fully aware that Trump didn't have his hands in the process. And was speaking very candidly about that. But I think, the larger issue, as you point to, is that Trump, the narcissism and the grandiosity that comes along with that, basically, imparts some level of, omnipresence and omnipotence in Trump's mind that basically, as long as he is holding the title of president, asterisk, quote unquote, that anything that happens, of course, that's not bad, right?
Right. No, anything to take credit for, he's going to take credit for it, and that only he alone
can do it, right? Exactly. I mean, that fits that whole description of himself that he seems to have, right? That he's so powerful and he can just wave his hands in the air and things happen. And so this is actually, I think, very much humiliating for him for it actually to come out that he really didn't have much to do with it.
That you got caught red-handed in the lie. But the thing is there are so many of these examples all along the road that, you'd think that this kind of stuff should have been vetted during the 2016 election cycle, that someone should have noticed that this was the personality.
Well, I mean, again, as we always discuss, this is the lure, right? I mean, when you think about Trump University, for example, right, that was something that was revealed to be like a big sham all throughout the campaign. I mean, that was an ongoing issue. And so I think the mystique of Trump being this, like, very shrewd businessman, I think even amongst the people who voted for him, there is an understanding that he is prone to swindling people and cheating people out of what he actually said he was going to give them. But again, the people who voted for it see that as something that is a very positive trait because it seems to be getting him ahead in life. Whereas those of us, who are on the opposite side see it as very maladaptive and actually very toxic.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, my mother. My mother would have beat me for lying, cheating, stealing. One of the things you never wanted to be, it was a liar or a thief.
Yeah, but in today's Republican Party, I mean, this is who you have to actually be to get elected these days, unfortunately. And no matter how many lies he tells, and no matter how many times he gets caught in these lies, I mean, I can't even keep count. I mean, the last time they said, like, how many thousands of lies he's told, right? I mean, the last time they issued a count, I mean, it's in the thousands. Whether it's 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, I mean, at this point, he has a reputation for being a pathological, habitual liar, and for not being able to follow through on any of his promises. And the people who are still really cheering for him are just finding ways to just disavow that. There's a cognitive dissonance that is much like what he has. They don't want to acknowledge something that is not very flattering to him, so then it just becomes fake news.
Yeah, he's our guy, so we no matter what, we're going down with the ship. But at some point, don't you think that they've got to, like any group of rats on a sinking ship, that they're eventually going to jump? I mean, at some point, I looked today. I don't know if you saw this Sam Nunberg guy who basically came out and said Mueller's got something on Trump. Trump knew that Junior was colluding, and there's all of this other stuff, and you go, hello, almost smoking gun. So the question then becomes, as these walls keep closing in, because there's tons of reports that his behavior is getting more erratic. There's all of this chaos around him. His number one, communications person, this Hope Hicks, is leaving, whom, was really kind of creepy, the whole stepdaughter kind of, daughter thing that evidently he's got going on. When those walls start closing in and he feels that, how much more chaotic can it get, I guess is my question.
I mean, it can actually get worse, unfortunately. It really isn't going to get better from this point on. I think the more that this Mueller investigation continues to gain steam, I mean, it's actually not slowing down. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when you have people like this Nunberg guy come out today and then, like, flippant, like very arrogantly say, like, I'm not answering that subpoena, but then follows that up with, like, all of this incriminating commentary. He's basically asking to be subpoenaed.
Well, he was subpoenaed, right? So, I mean, for me, the fun watch is going to be just how long it takes for him to get arrested and how many years he gets to spend behind bars.
Right. I mean, and he's flaunting this because, again, when they're speaking to their audience, they're speaking to people that they have convinced that this is all just a left-wing hoax. And so there aren't really any tangible consequences for those people that are just going and, running off at the mouth. But for Trump, this is getting very close to him because people that he knows, that he worked very closely with, have already been indicted and are already under house arrest and already having their property seized, and there are real-life consequences happening. And so even though, publicly he puts up this front of everything's okay and, this whole thing is hogwash, internally he feels that pressure. And he does know that the news cycle isn't changing. It's not getting any better for him. And the more and more people that are going down around him, and the more speculation about it getting closer and closer to him, again, it's that Edgar Allan Poe telltale heart. If you just think about that heart beating and just driving that person insane, Trump hears that heart beating. He hears Mueller's footsteps. And so what he's doing in response to that is, his tried and true, which is just a pick fight with people who are actually just like in popular culture and aren't actually even in the political arena for the most part. Like Alec Baldwin, he went all in on him over the weekend as well. And then now, he's going to pick this thing back up with LeVar Ball. And then, today he's going on and on about Obama and why didn't Obama do this, that, and the other. And so he's going to try to pick these fights again to distract from what the larger issue is. But again, that distraction is only getting him, so far. At this point, it's not really working. And so that's why, behind closed doors, he's just flipping out. And the staff doesn't know what to do with him. They don't know how to calm him down. They, of course, can't take his phone away from him. So, that's his security blanket amidst all of this. So, it's going to continue to be chaotic, and he's going to continue to be very, childish, I think, and immature in terms of how he's dealing with these crises.
My goodness. I'm just sitting here, I'm listening to this, and, it's, you're watching Saturday Night Live and Alec Baldwin is fun, and it's, it's entertaining. And then the reality, as I'm laughing at it, then I get this sad, sick pit of my stomach feeling that, oh my God, this isn't just funny. This is sad. This is terrible. This is the guy who's the president of the United States.
Yeah, and you know who else has that same feeling when they watch that? Donald Trump. Believe it or not, there's so much projection, right? As he's saying, this is a bad, this is terrible. Who is this guy? Nobody cares about this guy. Well, the sheer fact that you're even talking about him, right? Solidifies that he is somebody and he has struck a nerve in some way. And so, the fact that he continues to engage with these people really shows you how thin his skin is and how sensitive he is to criticism, how sensitive he is to being joked about. If you go back to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, everything he's doing to undo the Obama presidency, in a lot of ways, may have actually started in that room. When Barack Obama roasted Donald Trump, just the sheer look of he was horrified at how he was being publicly shamed. And he couldn't just take it lightly, and it's something that sticks with him, and he holds these long-term grudges. And so if at any given moment things aren't going well for him, it feels good to beat up on somebody. And so he just is that schoolyard bully that goes around and finds whoever he can, and actually, ironically, actually elevates that person and puts them in a higher standing, as we saw with LeVar Ball. Now LeVar Ball looks credible.
Wow. Stop, don't say that again. There's a lot of times where I want somebody to repeat. Don't ever say that again.
Everything's relative, right?
I keep coming back to it. Just, they say, may you live in interesting times. Interesting, yes.
They're too interesting.
Neurotic, insane, criminally insane. I think I want to pass. I have this conversation all the time where people are pining for the boring days that we had under Obama, or pining for the mildly crazy days of W.
Yeah.
And look, I still think W and Cheney are war criminals, but it shows you just how far this guy has gone.
Yeah, I mean, this is how bad it is. And I also think that, like, with Trump, there's some degree, even amidst all of his ridiculousness, there's a part of him that wants that stability and that, like, calm, positive news cycle as well. And so this is why, like, he sort of shocked and surprised everyone in that roundtable meeting they had over gun reform. And he just is like throwing out basically, like, a liberal's wet dream of things he wants to do on gun control. All these things allegedly that he's going to throw due process out of the window. Not necessarily the liberals want that, but, his positions that he took on guns were very much to the left. And you could, tell by how horrified the Republicans in the room were, and how kind of just giddy, and
how Dianne Feinstein was just, all at Twitter.
I mean, I've never seen her that, bubbly. But it was one of those moments where, Trump had just gone through, weeks of this, like, very terrible news cycle, and everyone sort of underestimating his ability to get anything done on anything. And he just sort of seized on that moment to go, I'm just going to kind of do something that is going to get me some positive press and get me some accolades and look like I'm, doing something about this issue, because he had just been hammered by, like, these high school students, actually. And so even though, the positions that he took in that meeting were antithetical to everything else he's, said to this point, and of course he's flip-flopped on it since then anyway, but this is just how desperate he is to have a positive news cycle and to look like he's actually competent at his job.
Yeah, it's not working.
It's not working at all. I mean, because ultimately we all see it as disingenuous. That day, nobody, I was actually very, like, heartened by that really no one in the press fell for it. Everybody was like, okay, this is a load. He's going to be saying something different, tomorrow or the next day. And so he really is losing whatever, morsels of, leeway people were willing to give him, or chances they were willing to give him to actually pick things back up. People know now that it's not going to get any better.
No, it's all downhill from here. But for me, some of the intrigue of the the latest episode as the White House turns, or the White House edition Celebrity Apprentice, because that's kind of what these impromptu kind of press conferences, like where the gun thing was. It's like a bad episode of The Apprentice.
Yeah.
For me, the intrigue is, when Jared goes down and Ivanka goes too, who saves who?
Right.
Does Ivanka side with daddy or baby daddy? So now it's kind of like a soap opera. And I'm going, this isn't how things are supposed to be done. We still have hungry children. We have homeless veterans. We've got infrastructure that's crumbling. We've got people without health care. You could just tick down 50 things that are more important than Ivanka choosing between daddy and baby daddy.
Right.
And yet that's where we are as a society.
It is where we are, and that's exactly where Putin wants us to be. We always have to remember this, that, the whole goal and purpose of putting this perpetual you-know-what storm in the White House was for it to be this constant, turmoil. And there's, the list of people who have, resigned in disgrace and, just gave up or now are under some, legal investigation. The list is extremely long at this point. And that was intentional. We have not seen, this, like, dysfunctional of an administration in recent history, because those administrations were not installed by a foreign adversary that hacked the election to thwart our democracy. And so whenever we sort of look up and go, why is this so chaotic? Why is this such a mess? Well, it was intended to be a mess. And we're busy trying to, detangle ourselves out of it. But that's just going to take, a lot of time. It's going to take due process. And Putin knew that very well, that that it was going to be, part one was putting him there, and then, part two is just the lack of progress that we're making at this point because we're just mired in this dysfunction.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, I come back to the Republican Party doing everything in their power to thwart this investigation. And it just goes, it can't, in my view, and you can agree or disagree, it can't be just Trump that they've got under their wing. I mean, you've got Daniel Rohrabacher, who, I've argued for years is Russia's congressman. It's got to be a lot of them, if not all of them. I mean, because look, they hacked the DNC, got Hillary an email, got her emails, got Podesta's email. No one's going to ever tell me they don't have, go down the list of Republicans and they don't have their emails.
Oh, easily. I mean, we already know, and for all that Donald Trump is trying to, throw blame at President Obama and sort of claim that he didn't do anything. I mean, most of what was put in motion that is now still in process in terms of the Russia investigation, that was put into motion during the Obama administration. And he actually did everything he could to preserve that intelligence prior to the transition so that they could actually continue this investigation. And so, this is something that I think the Republican Party is they're walking on eggshells here because there are a lot of people, particularly in the establishment. We've had reports coming out today that Mitch McConnell, there's someone, from the Obama administration saying that Mitch McConnell actually knew about this Russian interference in early 2016 and didn't say anything, obviously, because it behooved him to just let it happen because it would put his party in power.
Right. No, I'm not. That doesn't surprise me at all because, look, I remember being at more at the Democratic convention in Philadelphia, but also at the Republican convention in Cleveland, where that was the kind of, that was the hush talk, where it was, all this Russia stuff's going on. And, and I had a bunch of people going, we shouldn't be talking about this because, we'll be painted as conspiratorial and all this. And I'm going, I don't know. I mean, I think I want to know if a foreign government has hacked our election and if we have a Manchurian candidate. I think we need to know.
Well, but the Republicans were assured in their minds, and they weren't necessarily wrong, that if people really knew that information, that would be a stain on the Republican Party and their ability to, have control of three branches of government, that would be in jeopardy, in serious jeopardy. And what they are coming up on in terms of this blue wave of, 2018 that's in the making is that backlash. But that was sort of like an inevitable backlash in a lot of ways. I mean, because once you put these people there that really didn't have a mandate. I mean, when you think about the fact that
he lost.
Again, he lost, exactly. I mean, this is not an administration that the majority of the American population agrees with, and that's why his polling is the way that it is, and it continues to be in that 30% range, because people don't agree with this. And I think the longer that the Republican Party, tries to, obstruct this probe, it just makes them look even more guilty and untrustworthy. And I think that's why people are really fired up in these elections. I mean, here in Texas, we have Democrats showing up, breaking records for early voting. And people are fired up. Ted Cruz is nervous, as he should be, because even the state of Texas is now moving into they're calling it blue, per Gallup's polling. So this is actually something that, somebody tweeted the other day at me I thought was really apt. They said, this is like when the dog catches the bus.
Yeah, David Axelrod, and he doesn't know what to do.
Exactly, and they did everything they could, and in a lot of ways, committed treasonous acts to get a hold of this government. But actually, now that they have it, again, they're very dysfunctional and they can't do anything appropriate.
Thank goodness. So, last question I've got for you, then, what are you paying attention to this week? As someone who deals in mental stuff, what should we be expecting? What are you paying attention to this week?
Well, what I'm paying attention to is Donald Trump's response to the Mueller investigation, as always, because you can actually really see the correlation between, either some movement in the investigation, whether it be indictments or new documentation that he's asking for, or new interviews that he's asking for. Whenever that happens, it's almost like simultaneous that Trump starts some tiff with somebody else. And he does something to, in a lot of ways, distract and put the news cycle on something else other than this Mueller investigation.
You need to lay a little cover. I get it.
Yeah, so as always, I would just say if he's picking a fight with somebody, it's because he feels picked on, and it's because he feels like Mueller is breathing down his neck, and Mueller is breathing down his neck, and that's why he's fighting with everybody.
There you go. I'm looking forward to an exciting week. Jane, thanks so much. I appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Have a great week.
Always great talking with our good friend Propane Jane. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day auto workers at GM's Chevy Vega plant in Lordstown, Ohio, walked out on strike. The strike lasted for 18 days. The issues that fueled it were reminiscent of the sit-downs and wildcats that built the UAW in the 30s and 40s. Workers at Lordstown wanted greater control over the production process. The young, integrated workforce of the 1960s social protest era was fed up with long days, forced overtime, increased automation, and dangerous speed up on the assembly line. Long-standing grievances numbered in the thousands, and disciplinary firings were common. Absenteeism was rampant, morale was so low that cars left the assembly line incomplete or vandalized. By the time the strike ended, many felt it was called simply to allow workers to blow off steam. There was no real change in the production process, but jobs eliminated in the 1970 contract were restored, and some 1,400 disciplinary layoffs were dropped. The worker malaise suffered there came to be known as the Lordstown Syndrome. In his book, Staying Alive, the 1970s and the Last Days of the Working Class, Jefferson Cowie notes that the strike compelled the Senate to hold hearings on alienation at work. Its committee produced the report Work in America. This report confirmed many workers at all occupational levels feel locked in. Their mobility blocked, the opportunity to grow lacking in their jobs, challenge missing from their tasks. Cowie concludes that the strike and report initiated the quality of work-life movement that sought to redesign work, introduce automation differently, and invest in human relation strategies, most of which continued to empower management, not workers, albeit with a gentler hand.
It's not enough. What do you get? A little bit more than you always need. A little more man, a little more seed. It's not enough.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Chris sent me an email during the break. Says, on the steel tariffs, I think Trump just said it to help Rick Saccone. And there's a good chance they'll simply never implement the tariffs. He said, I also don't see how a blanket tariff is a good idea. A targeted one towards the manipulators is better. Thanks. Love the show. And I'm with you. I think you have to have targeted tariffs as well. But understand, that's when you start getting into the WTO, and that's when you start being able to be, sued and your tribunals and all of this stuff that we've signed on to. Understand, we've got 30 years worth of us signing agreements and trade agreements and all of this stuff, and WTO, GATT, all of that stuff. And you almost have to do it across the board. Now, you look at a lot of the countries that would be affected by this. As I understand, the way that this could have been done is you could have granted some waivers. I guess Trump hasn't done that. And, I got to be honest, Chris, I think you're probably absolutely right. A lot of this was to get Saccone, elected in the 18th, which will happen, just a week from tomorrow, which is why I think it's so important. People, check out Connor Lamb's website. I know they're asking for people to make phone calls, all of that. But out in Western Pennsylvania, stop and think about, how important the steel industry was for generations. And even today, I mean, they still produce a good bit of steel, but the employment isn't there. And we're losing more and more of that. When you stop and you think about from a national security perspective, being a manufacturing country, being one that can produce things is extremely important. I mean, you go back to World War II, and the story is very clear. The fact that we had our own energy, the fact that we were self-sufficient and able to produce our own munitions and turn our factories into plane factories and tank factories and all of that stuff, we had the capacity. Imagine having to have one of those kind of ramp-ups today. And I know people say, well, it's a different kind of world, Rick. We don't need all of those tanks and all that stuff. Yeah, you do. Sorry, this isn't going to be a button-pushing war, because then it'll be the end of civilization. So for me, the idea of protecting our steel industries, extremely important. But the bigger picture is protecting manufacturing in this country and rethinking this free trade agenda. Because what it has become is a situation where not even the countries that are winning in this trade war are actually winning. The billionaire class around the globe is, man, they've never been happier. But the working class of this world is not. Lives are getting better in China a little bit. And I know that the right wing loves to throw this. If American manufacturing didn't move to, name the third world country, then these people would just be standing around and they would have nothing to do. And, we're actually helping them to achieve, the American dream by moving forward. And what it's really all about is it's about the money. It's about the ability to make huge amounts of profit. It's the ability to bring those things back into the U.S. tariff-free because, hey, we're an American company. And again, tell me where we're trading when, and I've been saying this for years, all of the stuff that used to be made here is now made somewhere else and just brought back here. How is that trade? What did we trade for it other than the future of this country and the jobs that used to provide this stuff? I don't get what the trade is. I understand. You give me oil, I'll give you wheat. That's a trade. When I was a kid, I learned it very simply. We used to trade baseball cards all the time. And I learned at a very young age that, one, knowledge is important. You can't just go making a dumb trade. As I did as a young kid, I traded a Nolan Ryan card for a John Lowenstein. Nolan Ryan's in the Hall of Fame. John Lowenstein is a footnote that nobody will ever remember. Sadly, he was one of my favorite players. And looking back on it, I got the short end of the stick. But I learned. I go, wow, this is a bad idea. I'm not going to do it again. If I had to every day trade another Nolan Ryan for another John Lowenstein, I'd have gotten screwed. That's what's been going on in this country for far, far too long. We've been the ones going, and George Carlin did it. He used to do a great bit on this. We went into Vietnam to, to free those people and, whip a little industry on them. Because after all, the two letters in the middle of the word industry are U.S. And that's what we've done for decades. We've given our production away in the hopes of making people like us. And, oh, by the way, making huge, untold amounts of profit. So the fact that he is at least signaled that he's willing and did put tariffs on solar panels and washing machines, which were, in my view, too short and not enough, it's at least a start. And it's at least an opportunity for the solar industry in this country to get a foothold again. And it's at least an opportunity for the steel and aluminum industry to get a foothold and maintain. And all of this, the sky is falling nonsense, not buying it. Not buying it at all. Because understand, we are still the largest consumer economy in the world. Everybody wants access to this market. And they should have to do it on our terms, not on, oh, we're going to let you have complete and total unfettered access, which is ridiculous. Find me a Republican who wants to have people have unfettered access to our country. You know, you've got people who want, let's build a wall like Trump wants to do. Tariffs fit right into that wall idea. Just a thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Appreciate the thought, Chris. Thanks so much. Quick break. Right back with Bob Ney, Talk Media News.
And I'll go to work at night. I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Language matters. For example, the words that corporate and government officials use to report on the health of America's economy can either make clear to us commoners what's going on or hide and even lie about the reality we face. Consider the most common measurement used by officials and the media to tell us whether our economy is zooming or sputtering. Wall Street's index of stock prices. The media literally spews out the Dow Jones average of stock prices every hour, as though everyone is waiting breathlessly for that update. But wait, nearly all stock is owned by the richest 10% of Americans, so the Dow Jones average says nothing about the economic condition of the 90% majority of Americans. For us, and for the true economic health of America as a whole, we need to know the Doug Jones average. How are Doug and Dolores doing? Well, as we've seen, stock prices keep rising to new highs, while wages and living standards of the middle class and poor majority have been held down by the same corporate and political leaders telling us to keep our eye on the Dow. To disguise this decline, they play another dirty language trick on us when they issue the monthly unemployment report. Currently, with the unemployment rate down to 4%, they tell us America's job market is booming. But wait again. That only reflects the number of jobs, not the dollar value of those jobs in terms of wages and benefits. Having lots of people doing poorly paid work is hardly a healthy job market. Notice that they don't measure the stock market by the number of stocks out there, but by their value. And they should measure our job market the same way in order to give an honest picture of how Doug and Dolores are doing. This is Jim Hightower saying, of course, they'd only do that if they gave a damn about all of us Dougs and Doloreses. And that speaks volumes about their bias for stock-owning elites.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
The most important issue.
Here we go. Show.com. What a weekend it was indeed. And Monday, did not disappoint. I'm still not surprised that the Donald came back and all over the map on the tariff stuff and all the attacks on him and all of the right-wing media and center and left. No, we can't have tariffs. It's going to raise the cost of a beer. Just amazing to me. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Good to be on.
So what do you think of this? I mean, you see all of these attacks and all of these folks saying, well, we can't have these tariffs. It'd be horrible. Trade war, end of the world.
Well, I went through all of this detail, examples, everything that we could talk about today at different stations, over the course of the broadcast. And if you look at real life examples, which is what I gave, let's take Summitville Tile in Ohio. Okay, let's start with that. They had shipped tile over to China. This had been back about 2003 or 4. It was approved. It got to the port. Once it got to the port, China said, well, you've got to fill out a new 1,000-page document. We have to photograph your factory, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we got through the trade rep at that time, George Bush's trade rep, worked on him, pushed him, so he took all this time, and one company was able to get the tile through, which helped the workers back there. Now, that's one case. You can't have a trade rep doing that all the time.
Right.
So, generically, nobody ever corrected China on saying, no, you're not photographing factories. No, you're not changing the rules on a 1,000-page form. We don't do that to them over there. So, when you look at the trade issues, it goes, I understand, beyond tariffs. Nobody likes to focus on the detail. The devil's in the detail. Now, let's get to the tariffs for a second. Before anything happened, just the mention of tariffs, right, I saw the beer can and bourbon and jeans and, on ad nauseum. The stock market dropped for 2 days. So what? Okay, it drops. It's manipulated. Somebody got rich. It drops. You know what happens, Rick. Somebody buys, they sell. That's what happens. So there was this extreme panic. Soybeans are going to be cut off. Well, first of all, the Chinese weren't even affected anyway by the steel. So why were they cutting off soybeans? All of this panic ensued. And then some corporations, of course, Americans were against it because they're doing business in China and making a ton of money over there, which is not benefiting, here in America. So anyway, I don't think there's anything wrong with the tariffs. I don't think there's anything wrong with announcing more. Now, Trump, of course, started to vary, as you mentioned with the start of the show. And it's to be seen what happens, but I think there was nothing wrong with it. We need reciprocity. One more example. Let me use this example. It's a good one. If you and I want to go to Saudi Arabia tomorrow morning, which they won't let us in, if we want to go there tomorrow morning, we have to have a sponsor, usually a member of the royal family, to sponsor our visa. We go over. We cannot own, you and I together cannot own over 49% of the company we create over there. We cannot own a building. We cannot own the structure, the equipment, etc. Now, any Saudi can come over here tomorrow morning, build a station right next to you, own 100% of it, and do as they please and own the building. That's what they can do. Why can they do that? And what's so unconstitutional about we say, what's good for you is good for us and vice versa. So there's a big picture here.
But isn't it the same thing in China as well? I mean, you can't own 100% of
Sure.
an industry over there or a business
Right.
over there without having a Chinese sponsor?
Yeah, you have to have sponsors. You have to agree to all these things. You have to, let them steal your property rights and in the name of money. So there's nothing wrong with the tariffs. If they continue with these, but Americans need to, understand there's a little bit of pain, but a good for the long run. Hey, if this would have been done in 1990, 1992, you and I wouldn't even have a conversation about this because we would have had equality on this issue.
I'm with you. No, I mean, and my favorite one is I had someone, hit me over the weekend with, well, you just don't want American-made jeans. And I'm going, find me a pair of American-made jeans. I'm sorry. I've been looking at Levi's for years. There may be one line that's made here in the U.S., but the vast majority of them are made overseas. We don't make that stuff here much anymore.
Right.
And it's because of these trade
textile.
deals. And look, we've been getting our hats handed us for too long. And look, I don't like Donald Trump at all. There's nothing there for me except, look, I'm in favor of this. This should have been done 8 years ago, or like, as you point out, nearly 30 years ago.
Right. And I was just telling people today that asked me about it, what my opinion was on it. I said, look, because somebody brought up the issue they could undo the permanent trade status for China. I said, it's not going to be undone. First of all, Paul Ryan is not going to allow that to happen, or Mitch McConnell, and the international businesses. But that was an unholy alliance between Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton. And, and they did it, and everybody said, oh, it's going to help us. And they always would say the same thing. David Dreyer, a congressman from California, he'd personally try to lobby me on this issue. And he would say, well, look, we're losing jobs in Boeing. We have to have a trade deal. And I said, you get a trade deal, you lose jobs. Then you get a trade deal because you're losing jobs, and then you lose more jobs. It's an endless catch-22. So I hope Trump continues with the tariffs. I know he's going back and forth, and he's for them and might not do them, and he's going to do them. But I don't know, maybe him keeping everybody at bay overseas maybe will help. I don't know. It's worth a shot on this issue.
It's better than the nothing we've been doing and still losing jobs at an alarming rate. And look, I talk to people all the time in the steel industry, and they're saying, look, we're getting our lunch is being eaten. There are layoffs all the time. There's the one steel mill here in Pennsylvania hasn't hired in like 10 years. There's most certainly problems, and this, like you said, couldn't hurt. Let's move on. Subpoena day. I mean, get some grand jury subpoenas today.
Right. And there's a guy named, did you see the story of the guy
Nunberg.
I'm not. Yes. What on earth was that about?
Well, I mean, isn't this that kind of, we're in charge now, this kind of king mentality that we're in charge. We don't have to follow the law.
Oh, I know, but you don't rip up on Bloomberg TV a federal subpoena and say, I dare you. You don't do it. And then he said he doesn't like Donald Trump. He loathes him.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck in prison because it's coming. Just
for
that alone.
Listening to him scared me. So, but there was a whole series. They're asking for a whole series of names. Roger Stone, Corey Lewandowski. They're asking for this entire series of names of emails back and forth, which is what they do. In like our case, they went through 250,000 emails, and there's actually a system, by the way, just for purposes of edification here. There's a system, and I think it costs us $38,000, and it goes through and looks for words so you can go through there to see what is appropriate or not, for what they're looking for. So they are asking for a wide variety of names and from the witnesses.
It's going to be entertaining to see what happens to Mr. Nunberg, because one, you're basically flipping off the legal system, and two, you're also ticking off the guy who might pardon you. So you're basically a man without a country in this scenario.
I thought about that. He said, by the way, I don't like Donald Trump. I thought, well, if you're going to do all this, at least say you like him, stroke his ego a little bit.
And he also said that he actually believes Mueller's got something. And you go,
yeah, right.
You don't think much, do you?
It's like your wild Uncle Charlie that comes to dinner and spouts and off and everything. It's like if he was given a subpoena, rips it up and says, I don't care.
Yeah, just
sort of that.
Just nuts. Let's move on. Any truth to the Kim Jong-un meeting?
Yeah, I mean, look, here's what's amazing about it. He's meeting for the first time, of course, since 2011 when he took over the country after his father moved on. And he is meeting with the head South Korean spy. I mean, the guy that runs the spy agency. And they're out front about it. His name's Hoon, H-O-O-N. It's like, yeah, he's going to be at the meeting. I thought that must not bother them to just publicly say, okay, I'm meeting with the head of the spy agency.
Yeah, that's weird.
It can't hurt. They're sitting down with no preconceived conditions or conceived notions. So, I mean, might as well do it.
No, I'm all in favor of it. But when you look at this, is this kind of an affront to Trump? I mean, is this one of those things where North Korea is cozying up to the South just to tick off the Orange Menace?
Well, I kind of wonder a couple of things. Number one, I'm sitting here thinking that South Korea is taking a more mild approach. They don't have to have the qualification that Donald Trump is, which is, hey, I won't sit down with him unless he drops his nukes. South Korea just says they'll drop down. But I think somewhere along the line when the door shuts, the two of them have to be going, okay, we don't know what he's going to do. There's got to be some conversation somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be something. Interesting times. Now, a lot of talk about collusion, a lot of talk about Russia. Is it true that our State Department was given a $120 million grant to kind of look into what foreign governments are doing in our elections and actually spent nothing?
126 million. Yes, 126 million and spent zero. Now, the second part that's it doesn't shock me. It's happened with all the different presidencies, but they have 23 people assigned to this, all right, that are specializing in this, in the Russian situation, and none of them speak Russian. So at least use like maybe $60,000 to do Russian lessons. I do want to share, when we dealt with Madeleine Albright in Iran, and then George Bush's administration, there was back channels with Iran. Vic Snyder of Arkansas used to be in on the meetings, and a few other people, right? One time we needed to get a hold of the Iran desk at the State Department. So we thought, okay, there'll be an Iran desk where somebody will speak Farsi, an American, right? And we'll understand the Iran issues. Now, I can't make this up. When we called, I had my staff call, they said, oh, the person.
They actually just cut us off. Just completely cut us off from that. Interesting. But what I wouldn't be surprised with, to be honest with you, is if there was nobody there to do the interpreting, and everyone was just looking at the colorful writing and all that, going, "Oh, how pretty!" Not surprising whatsoever. Not surprising that they've granted $126 million to investigate what the Russians did during the 2016 election, or any country, and they've spent none of it. I mean, that's just amazing. And to have the 23 employees who have absolutely no Russian background whatsoever is just, it's the kind of stuff that a right-wing person would go, see, government doesn't work. Except this is a right-wing government that is supposed to be fixing that, right? It's amazing, amazing stuff. Just mind-blowing. Thanks so much, Bob. Appreciate it. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
For and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1770. That was the day of the Boston Massacre, when the first shots of the American Revolution were fired. But did you know that the massacre happened in part because of a dispute over jobs? In 1767, the British had passed the Townshend Revenue Act. It levied import taxes on goods such as tea, lead, paint, paper, and glass. Colonists were required to purchase these items from the British. The aim was to raise money to pay for the salaries of government officials in the colonies. The colonists resented the taxes and organized boycotts against the goods. Boston was at the heart of the dissent. In response, the British moved their soldiers into port cities to see the enforcement of the law. This angered the colonists even further. British soldiers tried to find part-time work since they earned poor wages for their service. This put the soldiers in direct competition with the tradesmen in Boston. Things came to a head when a brawl broke out between a group of colonist rope makers and British soldiers. 3 days later, about 50 colonists taunted the sentry at the custom house and pelted him with snowballs. More soldiers rushed to the scene. A soldier shot into the crowd. It's believed by accident. A volley of shots then rang out. 5 protesters fell dead. One was a rope maker by the name of Samuel Gray. Another was an African-American man named Crispus Attucks. The British attempted to appease the colonists by repealing all of the import taxes except the one on tea. But this reversal came too late. The shots had been fired that began the march to revolution. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. The European Union is trying to speed up what it says is a dragging Brexit process, introducing on Wednesday the draft of a Brexit bill to try and accelerate talks. Top EU officials blame Prime Minister Theresa May's government of dragging its feet and say that unless a Brexit bill is finalized by this fall, it won't be possible for the EU and UK parliaments to debate and approve it by March of 2019, when the official Brexit divorce is supposed to occur. Michel Barnier is the lead Brexit negotiator at the European Union.
If we wish to make a success of these negotiations, and I certainly do, we must pick up the pace.
The British government finds itself increasingly deadlocked on how to move forward on Brexit, especially on critical questions about the future relationship with the EU and how to manage the border between the British territory of Northern Ireland and EU member state Ireland. Russia has been reinstated into the Olympics, clearing the way for the country's athletes to compete under their national flag and hear that Russian national anthem at the 2020 Summer Games in Tokyo. Wednesday's decision from the International Olympic Committee follows the expulsion of 2 Russian athletes from the recent South Korean Winter Olympics for doping. But despite that, the IOC said it had seen no recent evidence of the kind of widespread state-sponsored doping efforts that got Russia banned from the Pyeongchang Games in the first place. And it's been more than a week since 110 schoolgirls were kidnapped by Boko Haram terrorists in Nigeria, and so far, all remain missing. After spending 2 days last week denying any kidnapping occurred, Nigerian authorities are now providing names and ages for those captured, who range in age from 11 to 19. In the hopes of stopping any further kidnappings, the Nigerian government says it plans to deploy armed police at every school in the country's tumultuous northeast. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascist or bound to lose?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Dating app Bumble, which I didn't even know there was. Why would you name a dating app Bumble? Yeah, I'm just going to bumble my way through this date. Evidently, they've banned profile pictures with guns. And I got to be honest, there's part of me that goes, I think I want to know if the girl I'm going to be dating is a gun nut. I think you get that out of the way, right from the start, and you can move on to the next. Interesting stuff. A couple of emails from folks claiming that the Republicans are pushing. Paul Ryan wants the president to run away from the tariffs, but Jeff points out that President Trump will maintain his tariffs because they see it as an opportunity to win Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Iowa, and Wisconsin in 2020. So Jeff's saying, look, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, maybe even Michigan, Iowa, those are big key states. Maybe this is a strategic campaign move for 2020. And the only thing I can say, Jeff, is if that's the case, I give Trump credit for being very confident that he's going to be around past 2018. So the eternal optimist, maybe that's what he is. I don't know. But the thing is you've got Trump saying, look, we're not backing down on the tariffs. He said, quote, we're not backing down. The U.S. has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world, whether it's friend or enemy. He went on to say that I don't think you're going to have a trade war because, as I've been saying, I don't think you're going to see it either because it's so minuscule. It's more of in my view, it's more of a symbolic move than it's an actual move. Now, I did find it interesting, and as I said earlier, all the people who are saying the sky's falling, it's the end of the world, and all that, I don't believe it is. So there's that. And finally, the last thing I wanted to get to, Orrin Hatch. Good old Orrin Hatch. Evidently was giving a speech at the American Enterprise Institute where he said basically that anybody who was in favor of Obamacare was the stupidest, and it was a dumbass bill. The worst thing he's ever seen. So there you go. I mean, getting health care for people, the stupidest, dumb thing he's ever seen. And I would expect that. Honestly and truthfully, I would expect that coming from someone like Orrin Hatch. And thank goodness he's going. I'm hoping that whomever the Democrats put up has a chance there in Utah. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I don't know that Mitt Romney would be any worse than Orrin Hatch. So there you go. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, download the podcast, get the app, all that stuff. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow as we pick up again.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at The Rick Smith Show. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show. We're working